Hi guys, this is Kimberly Siva at Mixed-Space Technologies, and today let's talk about Lexicon Entities. So for the next few videos, let's go ahead and grab this low poly free pack off the Unity Asset Store. This will give us a fun few models to work with together. I've already imported this. Then let's go to the tutorials folder and create a couple new folders. How about an intents folder and an entities folder? And we can take the change color intent and our light intents and put those in here to clean things up. Awesome. Now let's dive into this entities folder and create our first entity. We want an entity that's going to map to a few of these props in the scene. So let's do create, lexicon, entity, and let's do a prefab entity so that we can drop game objects onto it. We're going to name this prop entity. Okay, great. Give it the name prop. And then go ahead and lock this so that we don't lose it as we look through these folders. Let's see, inside here we go. So let's just create a few entity values. Maybe we want to be able to create this barrel that I see here. We can just drag the barrel prefab right there. Let's see, what else do we want? Maybe crates. Maybe die. And maybe one more. Oh, I like the mushroom. Okay, great. And one of the things we're going to be doing today is creating multiples. So we might use a phrase like create 3 barrels. And so we're going to want the plural version of each of these words as well. Crates, dice, and mushrooms. Okay, that looks good. We can go ahead and unlock this. So our entity is done. Now let's create an intent for this. I always like to start with a folder because intents have a few files associated with them. And we're going to call this the create prop intent. Create lexicon intent, create prop. Now let's group this with our other create intents. We already have a create primitive and a create model. That's our chess piece models. And since they all use similar verbs like create or make or put, it's a good idea to go ahead and group them all under the create intent. But we'll use create prop to make this one stand out. Okay, and create prop will always require our prop entity, and that's how this particular intent will get matched at runtime. If there's a prop entity, we'll end up getting this one. And for our optional entities, let's use a system entity. So Watson provides a bunch of system entities like currency and date and location. The most useful one, I think, is number. And so we're going to use this number to help us match things like, create 3 barrels. So let's go ahead and write that, create 3 barrels. Maybe add 4 crates and put 2 dice here. And I've very consciously chosen the words 4 and 2 as part of my sample phrases because 4 and 2 have homonyms like, 4. And we don't want the speech-to-text system to come back with this version of 4 because then the conversation service won't match it correctly. So whenever there's homonyms, it's a good idea to go ahead and put some samples in that can help train your custom model in the right direction. Okay, this looks good, so let's go ahead and create our action. And we're going to go fill out that action in a moment, but before we do that, why don't we get our lexicon actually syncing with the cloud so that it has time to train while we write. Today, I think let's work with, we're going to the samples scenes folder and we're going to grab the VR scene for this one. Okay. And our lexicon gaze here, let's grab the sample workspace and add our new create prop intent. And we're going to sync both of these services while we go and work. So let's go back into our tutorials folder, our new create prop intent, and we want the action here. We'll double click on that. Okay, great. So for this intent, we have two entities that we're interested in matching. The prop match, and then I'm going to copy this whole line and do it again for the number match. And this will be sys number. Okay, great. We're guaranteed to have a prop match. So our prefab is going to be prop match dot entity value dot get binding, and we know that it's a game object. Okay. And we're not guaranteed to have a number match, but before we deal with that, let's deal with the positioning. You probably noticed that for this intent, I'm not bothering with the position entity. That's the one that matches words like here. So we could do create 3 barrels here, but let's make our life a little bit easier today and just maybe use the moment that they said the word of the prop. So when they say create 3 barrels, when they say barrels, that's the position that we'll take out of the focus manager. And so our vector 3 position is going to be prop match dot focus position dot position. And then one of the things we want to do today that we haven't done before is actually drop these instantiated prefabs from a little bit above this position. That's going to help when we create multiples so they don't all end up on top of each other. So to do that, let's go ahead and add a little bit to our position. So maybe position.y plus equal 1. So 1 meter above the focus point. Okay, and you'll see how that all comes together. Now back to that number match. So if number match is not null, let's go ahead and get our count from it. And to do that, we do number match dot system value, and this is because this is a Watson system entity, and we're looking for the int value. So that's our count. If they said create 3 barrels, we should have a 3 in our count field now. So let's go ahead and iterate for int I equals 0 as long as I is less than count. Okay. And at this point, we will create our instances of that prefab. And then we'll have an else that will do the same thing, but just creating a single one because there was no number match if we end up here. Rather than duplicate our code, let's go ahead and create a function for this. So private void create prop is going to take a game object prefab and maybe a vector 3 position. Okay, our prop is, let's do a game object dot instantiate. That's how we create an instance of our prefab at the position, and then we need to give it a quaternion. Let's just make it the identity. We're not going to worry about rotation. All right, and let's do a couple things to set up this prop. First of all, let's add a rigid body. Add component rigid body. And that way we can drop it from a little bit above the focus point and have it fall with gravity and have it, react correctly with physics if there are other props in the area. For that to work, I happen to know that these props have a mesh collider, so we need to set that up correctly. Let's get component in children. Let's find that mesh collider. And if you're using different models, this may not pertain to what you're doing. But for us, we need to make sure convex is set to true. That's the only way for mesh colliders to work with rigid bodies. And the last thing we need to do is add we're going to add a component, our lexicon selectable component. Lexicon selectable. And that will allow us to select this prop after it's been created and move it around the scene and resize it, all those nice things. Okay. So now that we have a reusable function, let's go ahead and use it. Okay, we're going to use our prefab. Oh, and we could have all of these generated at the position that we found above, but you know what might be a little more interesting so that they don't all get spawned at the same point? Let's create a random position. I'll show you this. Vector 3, random position gets our position plus random dot, let's see, on unit sphere. I think this is what we want. Maybe inside unit sphere. Okay, and so this will be a point that's somewhere inside the unit sphere, which means that this prefab will end up being generated somewhere within a meter of the point that we give it. And that should give us a pretty nice effect. So let's set our random position here. And then if we end up down here, there was no number match, we're creating a single one, so we're not going to do a random position, we're just going to use the focus position. Okay, I know that was a lot of code, but I think we're done and it should have a pretty cool effect. So let's see how it works. Let's double check that, yep, everything is finished syncing with Watson. And that should be everything we need to do. We haven't done the VR scene together yet, but you move around using mouse and keyboard. Create 3 crates here. Create 4 mushrooms here. Oh, it didn't get the 4 right. Create 4 mushrooms. Create 5 mushrooms. Create 6 dice. Create 3 barrels. Well, everything except the 4 worked pretty well. We'll have to investigate that later. Oh yeah, and so we can make this smaller, move this one over here. So all our typical phrases work. Delete this. Awesome. Thanks, guys.